World War II is remembered for massive battles between giants: Stalingrad, Normandy, Kursk. But in the far north, above the Arctic Circle, a very different war was fought. In late 1944, Finland, once Germany's ally, suddenly turned its guns against the Germans themselves. What followed was a bitter struggle across snow, wilderness, and fire: the Lapland War. A campaign where yesterday's allies became enemies and where an entire region was left in ashes. To understand the Lapland War, we need to go back. Finland had already fought two exhausting wars. In 1939, the Soviet Union invaded during the Winter War. Finland fought bravely but was forced to cede territory. 2 years later, when Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, Finland joined in. This continuation war was fought to reclaim lost lands and push deeper into Soviet territory, but Finland carefully avoided calling itself an Axis power. By mid-1944, however, the tide had turned. The Red Army launched massive offensives. Finland faced the real risk of total occupation. To survive, Helsinki sought peace. On September 19, 1944, Finland signed an armistice with Moscow. One clause was absolute. Finland had to drive out all German troops from its soil, but there was a problem. Northern Finland, Lapland, was full of Germans. Nearly 200,000 soldiers of the 20th Mountain Army, commanded by General Lothar Rendulic, were still stationed there. And they were not planning to leave quietly. At first, the Germans tried to pull back peacefully under Operation Berk, a staged withdrawal into Norway. The Finns even cooperated, staging mock battles to show the Soviets they were trying, while letting Germans retreat with minimal fighting. But Moscow was not fooled. The Soviets sent a warning: fight seriously, or risk Soviet troops marching into Finland. The Finnish High Command gave the order. Real fighting would begin. The turning point came at the port city of Tornio. On October 1, 1944, the Finns launched their boldest move: an amphibious landing at Tornio on the Gulf of Bothnia. Finnish troops, supported by civilian merchant ships, landed behind German lines. The attack caught the Germans off guard. Street fighting broke out as Finnish units pushed to secure the town and vital bridges. German reinforcements counterattacked fiercely, using artillery and tanks. The fighting raged for days, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But Tornio remained in Finnish hands. From this point, the Lapland War was no longer a staged withdrawal. It was a real conflict. As they retreated north, the Germans unleashed a scorched earth campaign. Roads, bridges, railways, blown up. Civilians were forced to evacuate. Villages were torched. The greatest tragedy struck at Rovaniemi, the capital of Lapland. German engineers had laid charges to destroy depots and rail lines, but the fires spread out of control. By October 1944, Rovaniemi was almost completely destroyed. More than 90% of its buildings were lost. In the freezing Arctic autumn, tens of thousands of Finns were left homeless, their homes reduced to ash.
Battles continued as the Germans pulled back through Monio, Enontekiö, and along the rugged road networks toward Norway. The Finns, lightly equipped but skilled in winter warfare, pursued them, often on skis across swamps, forests, and snowfields. The Germans, meanwhile, used rearguard tactics, laying mines, ambushing and destroying infrastructure to delay their pursuers. In November, they launched Operation Nordlicht, a fighting retreat into northernmost Lapland and Norway.
By early 1945, the Germans had been pushed into Norway. The last Finnish combat actions took place in April. The Lapland War was over. Finland had fulfilled its armistice obligations. But the cost was staggering. Lapland lay in ruins. Over 40% of all buildings in the region were destroyed. Bridges and railways had to be rebuilt from scratch. More than 100,000 civilians were displaced. For Finland, the Lapland War was a war of necessity. By turning against Germany, the Finns kept the Soviets at bay and preserved their independence. But it came at the expense of their own north. Today, the Lapland War is remembered as one of the most unusual campaigns of World War II. where former allies fought in the frozen Arctic and where the cost of survival was destruction at home. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more history that often gets overlooked, hit subscribe and join for the next one.